In this video, I'm going to go over a simple strategy for improving your speed and accuracy on the CCA-F exam. The challenge with this exam is that the questions are long, often 3 or 4 sentences, packed with jargon that for most requires several rereads to even figure out what is going on. And with the exam being 60 questions long and only 120 minutes, you've got 2 minutes per question. However, after going through the official 60 question practice exam and every sample question in the official exam guide, I found out something that nobody's telling you. You don't need to think heavily about most of these questions. You need to recognize them. The truth is, the majority of these questions are the same question wearing different clothes. They're the same shape, the same trap structure, same handful of wrong answer archetypes over and over. So, I built a simple system, just 4 steps, with 3 reference tables for you to commit to memory. And today, I'm going to walk you through it live on the actual sample questions Anthropic publishes in the exam guide so you can see how it works on the real thing. Let's go. Okay, so now let's get into the actual system. The first step in solving these questions quickly is you're going to jump straight into reading the last sentence of the paragraph of the question. And what you're going to find in here is that there's going to be some language that's going to allow you to distinguish it between 4 different types of questions. The first type of question that's going to cover off over 70% of the questions is going to be a best fix kind of question. And what you're looking for in the tail is for it to say very plainly, most effective / best. And in these situations, what you're going to be doing is trying to diagnose the symptom, and then structurally, you're going to pick the correct fix, even if it's something that's very heavy. The second kind of question you're going to encounter is a first step kind of question. And what you're going to find here is going to include language such as first step, most maintainable, simplest, most efficient. It may even say something like most effective first step. If it says that, it's still a first step question. And what you're doing here is very similar to the best fix question, with the one very important caveat is that instead of going for the heavy kind of fix, you're going for the cheapest root cause fix first and demote any heavily but valid options out of the running. The third kind of question you're going to encounter is a root cause question. And what you're going to see in the last sentence of these kind of questions, it's going to say most likely root cause. For these, you're not trying to pick a fix. You're trying to identify what the STEM's evidence implicates and kill any options that are blaming components the STEM certified as working. So oftentimes it's going to have other information in that question that's going to tell you that this was working fine, and you're going to immediately be able to kill those. The last kind of question is the special category, and I do have a section at the very bottom that's going to go into these. There's about 5 different big ones that fall in. We're not going to go into those on this video, but if you do have time, I recommend reviewing them. Okay, so step 2 is you're going to then scan the STEM for 3 things: numbers, certifications, and constraints and requirements. So numbers are going to help you identify what the actual symptom is. So you might see in some of these questions, for example, 12% skips verification. That's going to tell you that there is a compliance issue. If it says 94% single versus 58% multi mixes up parameters, that's pattern confusion. What that's going to do is it's going to help you figure out what the symptom is, and then it's going to help you when we move into step 3. The second thing you're looking for are certifications. So this is when it, declares a certain component is already healthy. And what that's going to do is it's going to help you eliminate any answers that reference trying to fix that healthy component. The third thing you're looking for are constraints and requirements. And so a constraint can kill even a normally best answer. So for example, the question might say, you decide to add few shot examples. So when you see that, you know that any correct answer has to include using few shot examples. And so description-based fixes that don't use few shot examples are immediately dead. All right. So after you've scanned through and you've identified these 3 things, you're going to go down into step 3, which is you're going to identify that symptom that you picked out from the numbers, and you're going to check the reflex table, which is right here. This is something that you should memorize, and it should help you actually, once you have these all kind of in the back of your head, when you see that symptom, and if it matches, you're going to just immediately be able to pick out the answer without going through any more steps. That should get you to the point where after you've read the question, you can probably knock these questions in less than a minute. However, if you find that the symptom is not in this reflex table, we move down to step 4, which is the process of elimination step. And so during the process of elimination step, what you want to be doing is going through the questions and killing off the very obviously wrong answers and getting it down to ones that seem correct. And we will then resolve with a tiebreaker. So what we use to do this elimination is we go through this instant kill list, and you will be able to review this on your own. We'll talk about it when we go through their questions and we have ones that are relevant. But these are things that you'll see them in the question or within the answer response that make it obviously wrong. So we'll go through one right now. So for example, anything that involves fine tuning or any of that machinery that was specifically called out by Anthropic as out of scope is immediately a wrong answer. We know that, we're not going to be tested on fine tuning. We're not going to be tested on anything that involves streaming, computer use, rate limiting, all those instantly wrong. So let's say that you've gotten it down now to, you've eliminated 2 of the wrong answers just based on the instant kill list, and now you've gotten down to tiebreakers. So there's 4 tiebreakers that you have to work through. The origin beats downstream. So we always want to look for that root cause of the problem. Usually you'll have 2 potentially valid answers at the end that both solve the problem, but one is attacking that root cause and the other one is attacking something that's more symptomatic. Choose the one that hits the root cause. It's always correct. The next is proportionality. Remember before that if it was the first fix, the cheaper fix always wins in that situation. If it doesn't say anything about first fix that's absent, remember, structurally correct fix wins in that case. Third tiebreaker, the right level of the hierarchy. Routine/transient handling stays local. Judgment calls go to whoever has the context. And retry is about transience, not authority. Transient equals retry locally. Permanent, propagate with context. The last tiebreaker, preserve information. If you ever see something that one answer is more likely to hide stuff than the other, always choose the one that doesn't, that surfaces the ambiguity. Losers compress information, hide, auto-resolve, or block, waiting for completeness. So those are our 4 steps. Let's go ahead and get into some questions where we can see these applied. Here we are looking at question 1 of the official Anthropic CCA-F exam guide sample questions. And what we're going to do is, like the guide says, go to the very last sentence of the paragraph, and we're looking to classify this as a specific type. So what we see here are what change would most effectively address this reliability issue. And the key words here are most effectively, which tells us that this is a best fix kind of question, one of those 70% cases. And the paraphrasing here matters because there is no cheapness qualifier coming in. That means that the structurally correct fix is going to win, even if it's heavy, and I'm not going to demote an option just because it's more work to do. Step 2, we're going to scan the stem, and in this one here, there's 2 things that jump out. First, we see that there's a number, 12% of cases, no rounding error, but it's not a total failure either. It's a probabilistic failure. The agent usually does the right thing, but sometimes it doesn't, and there's a consequence. Misidentified accounts. Incorrect refunds, that's money and that's compliance. So what we're going to do is we're going to put those 2 things together, which allows us to go into our step 3, where we can name the symptom, check the reflex table, and get on to figuring out our answer and seeing if there's a match. So what we do here is we know that this is a situation where we have now skipped something before, something that caused a financial opportunity. And so we know that our answer needs to require a programmatic prerequisite gate. Here's the principle underneath it that you need to tattoo on your brain because it's the single most tested idea on this exam. Prompts are probabilistic, code is deterministic. So you can write the most emphatic system prompt in the world. You can put mandatory in all caps. It will still fail some percentage of the time because you're asking a model to comply. When compliance must be guaranteed, Identity verification before a financial operation, for example, you don't ask. You need to enforce that. You need to put a gate in the code that physically blocks that from running. So let us go ahead and look at our answer options. So we have answer option 1, add a programmatic prerequisite that blocks lookup order and process refund until get customer has returned a verified customer ID. That answer sounds pretty great right off the bat because it uses the word programmatic prerequisite. Usually I think we could actually just pick that one and move on, but let's go ahead and see what else they've tried to sell me. So we also see option B, enhance the system prompt to state that verification is mandatory. Read that again. It's a prompt. It's a request. And the word mandatory is doing bait work here. It sounds like enforcement, but it's still just text asking a model nicely. You go from 12% failure to maybe 4% failure. And on refunds to the wrong people, 4% is not 0. It's still a problem. So not a good solution. Option C, add few shot examples showing the agent always calling get customer first. This is the same problem. Few shot is a real technique. It's a correct answer to other questions on this exam, but it reduces the failure rate and it doesn't eliminate it. And remember, we have a financial opportunity at stake here. Option D, implement a routing classifier that enables only the appropriate subset of tools per request. This one is the most sophisticated sounding one, and it is wrong on a different axis than the other two. The problem here isn't which tools are available, it's what order they're getting called in, and D fixes the availability, but the bug is the ordering. So it's the wrong layer entirely. Read the tail, read the numbers, name the symptom, and build your answer before you read the options. So you're matching against your own conclusion instead of getting sold on theirs. And just a quick aside here, some best fixed questions are purely reflex. There's a sample question that you would see where a CI pipeline hangs indefinitely, and the answer is just the -p flag. When you see that, 20 seconds, you can just move on. Honestly, this one right here, probably same kind of situation where you could have just seen that it said programmatic prerequisite gate, and if you had this reflex table under wraps pretty well, yeah, you could just move on. Okay, now let's move on to question 2. So, like we always do, let's read that last sentence of the paragraph. What's the most effective first step to improve tool selection reliability? Step 1, the tail. Most effective first step. Those 2 words right there, first step, just change the entire question. This is not a best fix question. This is a first step question, which means the cheapest root cause fix wins. I am now actively suspicious of any option that's proposing big architectural change. So, on the last question, heavy was fine, but here, heavy is a trap. Step 2, we're going to scan the stem. And let's look at what this one handed me. It says both tools have minimal descriptions. You see that? The stem is telling me the root cause. It's not hiding it. It's saying it right there. Minimal descriptions. Step 3, let's think about the reflex table. What do we know if we've studied this reflex table about things that have minimal descriptions? Let's look. Is there anything in here that talks about minimal overlapping tool descriptions? We have 2 tools with near identical descriptions. So we know that when we see an answer or a question that mentions that there's 2 tools with near identical descriptions, the answer is always going to involve a rename plus redescribe of both sides. We need to do both. So what we're now looking for, okay, so let's look through our answers to see which one does this. Add few shot examples to the system prompt demonstrating correct tool selection patterns with 5 to 8 examples showing order-related queries routing to lookup order. This isn't doing anything to change the description. Expand tools description to include input formats it handles. Okay, I'm already liking that it's mentioned something to do with the descriptions. Handles queries, edge cases, boundaries, explaining when to use it versus similar tools. Okay, that's interesting. Implement a routing layer that parses. Okay, this one, we're talking about routing layers, already sounds very suspicious given that we're looking for a first step situation. That sounds heavy. Let's just skip that one for now. Consolidate both tools into a single lookup entity tool that accepts any identifier and internally determines which backend to query. No. So the only one that is touching descriptions is B. So we're going to choose that one, and let's go ahead and see what it tells us. Yes. Correct answer is B. Tool descriptions are the primary mechanisms LLMs use for tool selection. When descriptions are minimal, models lack the context to differentiate between similar tools. Yep, so we got that one right there. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, now we're going to jump down to question 7 so that we can look at the third kind of question tail that we're going to see. So in this one right here, we're going to do our first step, which is read the last sentence of the paragraph. It says, what is the most likely root cause? And so we know that this one is now that root cause question type. And so what we're trying to do here is we're not looking for a fix. We're trying to identify what the STEM's evidence implicates, and we want to kill any options that are blaming components the STEM certified as working. So step number 2, now that we've figured that out, is to go into the question, and we want to read the STEM and look for if there's any certification and if there's any evidence here. And so right off the bat, we are skimming after running the system on the topic, impact of AI on creative industries. We observe that each sub-agent completes successfully. Okay, so boom, right here that says you observe that each sub-agent completes successfully. That is a certification. We heard that some part of this is working correctly. It's healthy. Sub-agents, the ones that are, we can keep reading. We know that some are going to get mentioned here. We know that that is a sub-agent. That one's working correctly. See that the document analysis agent, that one's working correctly. And the synthesis agent, all 3 of these must be working correctly. And so any options that are blaming one of them are immediately dead on arrival as answers, potential answers. Okay. And then the next thing we're looking for is evidence. And so as we continue to read, it says, however, the final report cover only visual arts, completely missing music, writing, and film production. Okay, so that is the thing that went wrong. That's our symptom right there. And then when you examine the coordinator's logs, you see it decompose the topic into 3 subtasks. Okay, it says AI and digital art creation, AI and graphic design, AI and photography. That looks a lot like evidence right there. Those seem like 3 very specific categories that the coordinator had decided to break this down into. And because we know that the other 3 sub-agents didn't do anything correctly, it seems very likely that this is the problem right here. So we know that the root cause is printed right there in the question. The coordinator decomposed the topic too narrowly, and the sub-agents, they did exactly what they were told. So what we're going to do is look through these 3 answers and look for any of the answers that are telling us that the coordinator made a mistake. Answer 1, synthesis agent lacks instruction for identifying cover. Okay, blaming synthesis agent can't be correct. Coordinator agent's task decomposition is too narrow, resulting in sub-agent assignments that don't cover all relevant domains of the topic. That's got to be our answer right there. But for sanity's sake, let's keep reading through. Web search agents' queries are not comprehensive enough. Blaming a sub-agent can't be correct. Answer 4, document analysis agent is filtering out sources related to non-visual creative industries due to overly restrictive reliance criteria. Can't be that one. Blaming another sub-agent. Gotta be answer B. Let's go ahead and check if that's right, and it is. All right, let's move on. So as we're scanning down to our next question, I do just want to show you for evidence sake that this step 1 of categorization does work very well throughout all of these questions. And so we're going to do a quick rapid fire where I just show you how this categorization continues to work and hold up. So question 8, which air propagation approach best enables intelligent recovery? What do we see here? The word best fix. That's a best fix question. Next one down. What's the most effective approach to reduce overhead while maintaining system reliability? What is it again? Oh, you guessed it. Best fix. Like I told you, 70% of the time, these are going to be best fix questions. All right, question 10. What's the correct approach to run Claude code in an automated pipeline? I know that correct approach sounds a little bit unique, but really it's just another flavor of what you're hearing with best or most effective, correct approach. Okay, now let's get down into question 11. And so same approach as always. Let's go in and read that last sentence of the question to figure out its type. And it says, how should you evaluate this proposal? Okay, key thing here. This is obviously not a best fix question. It says nothing about most effective, best, etc. Nothing even like correct. It also is not a first step question. There's nothing about taking a first step. It doesn't say anything about first. Also, no root cause question. This is one of those special type questions I mentioned to you, one of those minority special situations. And so what we're going to do is just go ahead and look at this special type table and put it into practice. So what we see here is that this one falls very cleanly into the evaluating a proposal someone made type of question. And for these types of questions, what's important to keep in mind is that the proposal may be partly correct. Don't assume it's all good or all bad. The winning option can accept one half and reject the other. Now that we've figured out the type of question it is, what we need to do is read the question for the stem. So what we see is your team wants to reduce API costs for automated analysis. Currently, real-time Claude calls power two workflows. One, a blocking pre-merge check that must complete before developers can merge, and two, a technical debt report generated overnight for review the next morning. Your manager proposes switching both the message batch API for its 50% cost savings. Okay, so what we got out of the stem is two things. One, we have the proposal. Your manager is trying to save costs. So the correct answer should have something to do with saving costs. The second thing we got out of it is the current state of what's going on and what he's looking to apply it to. So there's two things that he's looking to apply it to. One is a Claude call that is being used for a situation that is blocking developers. It's that pre-merge check. And the second is a technical debt report that can happen overnight. So one of these steps blocks developers when they don't have access to it. The other one can happen overnight and it doesn't block developers. Just basically on its surface, we probably have pretty good information to answer this question. But let's go ahead and check our reflex table, because if we studied this, the answer should come to us even faster. So over in our reflex table, we have a specific section actually right here. It's called batch or sync stems. And anytime you see any stem that talks about batching, we can read this and it gives us great guidance on how to solve it. So in one of these stems, non-blocking processes that can happen overnight or weekly, those are things that you should batch. Things that are blocking, if this is pre-merge developer waiting, these are things that should go through the sync API. Cost savings alone never justify batching or never justify blocking work. Okay, so now with this in mind, we have everything we need to answer this question. Let's look at the options. First option, use batch processing for technical debt reports only. Keep real-time calls for pre-merge checks. Honestly, this one sounds great. If this was me on this exam, I'd be choosing that and moving on. Let's look at the other options. Switch both workflows to batch processing with status polling to check for completion. This, unfortunately, is basically just accepting your manager's proposal. And what we know is that we do not want to be batching anything that could be blocking a developer. Wrong answer. Keep real-time calls for both workflows to avoid batch results ordering issues. Like we saw in our reflex table, we actually do want to batch anything that can happen overnight. We do also, like this question says, we do want to have cost savings. Even without seeing the sync table, we know that this one does nothing to get cost savings. So this was an instant kill. D, switch both to batch processing with a timeout fallback to real time if batches take too long. This one is tempting for someone who does not have the right background on this, because it kind of makes it sound like you can do the batch processing and also still get the benefits taking too long. But really, this just overcomplicates something that can be done much more easily by just doing the base sync API. Okay, yep, and then you see right here that the answer is A, which is correct. All right, guys, so with that, that wraps us up. If you would like my guide, it's linked in the description below. Please go ahead and download that and use it, and best of luck on the exam, guys. Go kill it.